I married my husband 3 years ago. We met in a quiet season of life, both recently divorced, both craving something steady. He was kind, practical, dependable, everything my first husband wasn't. So when he asked me to marry him just over a year into dating, I said yes without hesitation. We settled into a calm life together, the kind where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. And honestly, I thought that was what I needed. He had a son from his previous marriage, Jake. I didn't meet him right away. He lived with his mother in another state and only came around occasionally, but last year he moved in with us for college. I won't lie, I was nervous. Blending families is complicated, and he was at that age. Too old to treat like a child, too young to relate to as a peer. But Jake surprised me. He was quiet, respectful, always kept to himself. We didn't talk much beyond small things. Dinner, classes, laundry. Still, it felt awkward. I wasn't sure what my role was. Not a mom, not a friend, just this woman his dad married. He didn't give me any trouble, and for that I was grateful. But there was a distance, always. He was polite but distant. Sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I didn't notice, nothing inappropriate, just curious maybe. He was still figuring out who I was too. My husband worked a lot, and when he wasn't working, he was exhausted. We barely had meaningful conversations anymore. I started to feel invisible in my own house. It's not like he was unkind, just checked out. I told myself it was normal that marriages go through phases. But I couldn't help noticing how long those phases lasted. Weeks without a kiss. Months without intimacy. We were two people sharing a space more than sharing a life. One day, I came home from grocery shopping and found Jake fixing the leaky kitchen faucet. He hadn't been asked. I complimented his initiative, and he just shrugged and said, "Didn't want you dealing with it alone." Caught me off guard. My husband hadn't even looked at the sink in weeks, but here was this 19-year-old, handling it like a man. I thanked him and smiled. He smiled back. It was the first time I saw something more than politeness in his eyes. I shook the feeling off. It was nothing, just a simple gesture. But it lingered. A week later, I overheard him telling someone on the phone, "Yeah, she's actually really cool. Not like most stepmoms." My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't flattery. It was attention, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I told myself I was reading into it too much. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't start noticing him more after that. The way he held eye contact. How he smelled after a shower. How his voice deepened with confidence when he spoke about something he cared about. I didn't think anything would come of it. I didn't even think I wanted anything to. Until the night I came home early and everything shifted. It was a Friday evening. My husband had flown out for a weekend conference, and I was supposed to be staying with a friend overnight. But plans changed, and I decided to come home early. The house was quiet when I walked in. I didn't think to announce myself. Why would I? I assumed Jake was out or in his room like usual. I dropped my bag by the door and started upstairs, planning to shower and sleep early. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard a low sound coming from Jake's room. At first, I thought he was watching something on his laptop. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to look, but my eyes flicked toward the opening instinctively. What I saw made me freeze. Jake was on his bed, clearly lost in a private moment. My mind went blank. I wasn't supposed to see that. I knew I should turn away, walk back down, make some noise to warn him. But for a second, too long a second, I stood there stunned. Then he looked up. We locked eyes, both of us frozen in place. My face burned with embarrassment. I stammered something, an apology I think, and turned away, practically stumbling down the hallway. I shut my bedroom door, leaned against it, and exhaled sharply, heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. I felt a deep flush of shame, not just for walking in but for not looking away sooner. For how my body had reacted in that 1 second. For the thought that flashed uninvited across my mind. The silence in the house grew heavier. I didn't see Jake for the rest of the night. I skipped dinner, stayed in my room, and tried to distract myself. But my thoughts kept circling back. I kept reliving that moment. His expression, the startled look, the flush on his face, the rawness of it. It wasn't just the shock that stayed with me. It was the strange ache I couldn't explain. The next morning was awkward beyond belief. He stayed in his room most of the day. When we did cross paths, we barely made eye contact. He mumbled a greeting, and I gave a tight smile. We didn't talk about it. What could we say? I figured it would blow over. Accidents happen. Adults move on. But it didn't blow over, not for me. I found myself thinking about it constantly, even when I didn't want to. Not just what I saw, but how it made me feel. Not disgusted. Not angry. Confused. Curious. And worse, flattered. There was something deeply unsettling about being reminded I was still seen. Still desired, even if only accidentally. My husband hadn't looked at me that way in months. Maybe longer. I hated myself for those thoughts. I reminded myself this was wrong, that he was just a kid figuring things out. But late at night when I lay in bed, I wondered if that moment meant anything to him too. I wondered if he thought about it. I wondered why I hoped he did. Days passed, but the tension didn't ease. If anything, it deepened. We didn't speak about what happened, but it lingered between us like something alive. I caught him looking at me sometimes, quickly looking away when our eyes met. I told myself it was embarrassment, nothing more. But part of me wondered if he was thinking the same things I couldn't stop thinking. I started noticing everything. The way he moved around the house, how he smelled when he passed by, the subtle changes in his voice. He was becoming a man, and I was noticing it more than I should. I hated myself for it, but it didn't stop. What bothered me most was how easy it became to justify the attention I started giving him. A smile that lasted too long. A compliment that crossed a line. I wasn't testing him. I was testing myself and failing. One night, I stayed up late in the kitchen, scrolling my phone, pretending to be distracted. He came in for a glass of water. We ended up talking about nothing, classes, movies, music. But the casualness felt forced. Every word was loaded, every pause stretched. I could feel the air between us shift. When he laughed at something I said, I saw his face light up in a way I'd never seen before. Not as a boy, not as a stepson. Just a man. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about marriage or labels. I was thinking about him. The conversation slowed, but neither of us moved to leave. I made a joke about his late-night routines and how he was going to ruin his sleep schedule. He grinned and said, "Maybe I sleep better when you're still awake too." It was subtle, but I felt it. That wasn't a random comment. That was a choice. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. And he looked right back. The silence was louder than anything we'd said. From that night something changed. We weren't avoiding what happened anymore. We were circling it. He started helping out more, sitting near me, asking questions that didn't need answers. I should have shut it down. But instead I leaned into it. A gentle touch on the shoulder. A shared glance that lingered. Nothing overt, nothing physical. But emotionally, I was already drifting somewhere I shouldn't go. I found myself dressing with him in mind. Subtly but intentionally. Nothing obvious, but I caught his gaze once and didn't look away. There was heat in it, curiosity. It made me feel exposed. Alive. Desired. And terrified. I told myself nothing would happen. That I was still in control. But I knew better. The worst part was how natural it felt. Like we were already in something that had no name. Like we both understood this quiet, dangerous connection we were building. Every part of me screamed to walk away from it. But I didn't. I stayed. Fed it. And I started to wonder what would happen if the moment ever came where neither of us pulled back. The storm like came late that night, loud and sudden, nothing extravagant, shaking the windows like a warning. Just me trying once again curled up to remind him I was still here, trying to focus on a book I wasn't really reading, and I couldn't remember the last time he looked at me the way he used to. And we had the jobs flickered off just after midnight. Everything we talked about when we were just dreaming, punctuated only by the sound of rain, not unloved, instead unnoticed. I didn't expect Jake to check on me, but no longer saw. He stood in the doorway with a flashlight. Tom was polite, dependable. I nodded, said I was remembered to be. But my voice betrayed the truth. Had gone stale. He stepped
conversations
closer, handed me the
flashlight,
bills, errands,
and stood there
and
for a
second
orders.
like he wasn't
He
sure
stopped
if he should stay or
initiating
go.
anything intimate.
Then softly
I
he
stopped
asked,
trying because
"Do you
rejection,
want me to sit
even
with you
subtle,
for a bit?"
hurts in
I
ways
didn't
people
answer
don't
right
talk
away.
about.
The
Night I
moved
caught
the
him
blanket
scrolling
slightly,
through suggestive
and he
content
took it
on
as
his phone
permission.
while I slept
We
beside
didn't
him.
talk.
Something
We just
inside
sat
me
there
cracked.
listening to the storm.
I wasn't angry,
I
just
could feel
numb.
the heat of him
It
next
was
to me.
easier to
Our
pretend I didn't
shoulders
see it
barely
than to
touching.
ask why.
The silence
So when his
between us
birthday
didn't feel
approached, I
uncomfortable
panicked.
anymore.
The idea
It
of
felt
another
full,
year slipping
heavy
by
with
with
everything
everything
unspoken.
and polite small
His
talk
hand
felt
brushed
unbearable.
mine.
I didn't
wanted to
move
wake
it.
us up.
Then his
Shake
fingers
him.
curled slightly.
Remind him we were more than just
barely
teammates
there.
under one
I
roof.
looked at him,
And in
he
that
looked
desperation,
back.
a thought
And in
crept
that
in.
look,
Every
something
wall we'd
wild,
been pretending existed
and
finally
admittedly
dropped.
a little twisted.
He leaned
What if I
in
gave
slowly,
him the
like
fantasy
he was waiting
he never
for me
dared
to
ask
stop him?
for?
I didn't.
Something that would leave
When
him
our lips
breathless,
touched,
disarmed,
it wasn't
and maybe
explosive or wild.
Remind
It
him
was
what it
soft,
felt like to want me.
cared. I
It
knew what
tasted
it meant
like
the
guilt
second
and
I
want,
searched.
and everything
I wasn't
we'd been holding
naive.
back.
Every
I
click,
pulled
every
away
profile
first,
made it
heart
more
pounding
real.
in my throat.
I wasn't just
My
planning
voice
a birthday
cracked when I
gift.
whispered,
I was crossing
"We
a
can't."
line.
But
I
I told
didn't move.
myself it wasn't
He
cheating.
didn't either.
I wasn't
"I
doing
know,"
anything
he
physical.
said, barely audible.
I wasn't replacing
"I'm sorry."
myself. But
I
he
was
didn't
giving
look
him
sorry.
something I couldn't
He looked
anymore.
exposed.
At least that's what I
Vulnerable.
clung to.
Like he'd been
The
holding
woman I
this
found
inside
was
for too
expensive,
long.
professional,
And I couldn't
discreet.
deny it.
Everything
Everything
about her screamed
I stood
luxury
up and walked to the window.
and distance,
trying to breathe
no
through
strings.
the rush of panic
I planned
and
every
adrenaline and
detail.
shame.
The
He
room,
stayed
the music,
seated,
the
watching
note that
me.
said,
I told
"Trust
him
me,
this
let
wasn't
go."
right.
It
That
felt
it
like a
couldn't happen
performance,
again.
a
He
last-ditch
nodded.
effort
I
to
believed
revive
him.
something on the
I
edge
needed
of
to believe
flatlining.
him.
I told
But
him
deep
I had a
down,
surprise.
I knew a line had been
Blindfolded
crossed.
him.
Whether we acted on
Whispered
it
in
fully
his
or
ear
not,
that I'd be right
that
back.
kiss wasn't a
He
slip.
smiled the way
It was
he
a
used
choice.
to.
Just for a
Confession.
moment, I believed
The next
this could
morning
be the
we
turning
barely
point.
spoke.
I stood
Everything
outside
looked
the
the
hotel
same, but
room door,
nothing felt the
hands
same.
trembling. When my husband
heart
came
beat
home
louder
that
than
evening,
the silence
I
in the
kissed him
hallway.
hello and
I
asked
wasn't
about
sure
his
what
trip
scared
like
me
nothing
more,
had changed.
that it would
but
work
something
or that
had.
it wouldn't.
Something
That
I
he'd
couldn't
come
take
out a
back.
changed man,
I didn't
grateful,
tell anyone.
present.
I didn't
Or
act
that
on
he'd
it
come out
again.
the same.
But sometimes
worse,
late
even
at
more
night I think
distant.
about that moment
But as I
and wonder
leaned
what
my
it
head
really
against
meant.
the cool wall,
I wonder if
trying
he
to
does
catch
too.
my breath.
I don't
I
feel
never
proud.
imagined the truth
I don't
that would
feel
greet me when I
justified.
opened that door again.
But I feel changed. And that might be the hardest part. Because some betrayals don't need to go any further to leave permanent marks.